What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Brave and Faithful podcast. I'm your host, Raiden Denicio. And today I have another podcaster with me. He's also Army veteran. He's also got a vast experience as a law enforcement agent, as a Border Patrol, ICE Special Agent, the host of the Protectors podcast, Dr. Jason Piccolo. Jason, how you
Hey,
doing?
great, brother. Thanks for having me on. And I commend you for jumping into the podcast world. It's not easy, but once you get over 4 or 5 episodes, which you are well beyond, it gets there, man. It gets to become kind of like your life. So thanks a lot for having me on and sharing your time with me.
Oh, no worries, man. Thanks for taking the time. Before we get started into the whole podcasting and what you're doing with that, can you just share a little bit about, your service? I mentioned you were in the Army, how long you served for, and what did you do in the Army?
Yeah, in the 90s, 1993, I enlisted active duty, artillery, cannon crew member, Fort Carson, Fort Hood. I got out and I decided to go to college. Did the ROTC. When I got out, I thought I was going to get out. I thought I was going to be like E4 Mafia for life. But for some reason, like I joined the Guard and I joined ROTC on the same day. Went into an intel unit in the Guard doing human stuff. Commissioned as an infantry officer, but then I went to inactive reserves, individual ready reserves around 99 because I went into the U.S. Border Patrol next.
Okay.
Started federal law enforcement, did that for, I'm still doing it 21 years later, 21 and a half years later. But I was involuntarily recalled uh, in the IRR back in 2005 and 2006, just in time for, the big push in Iraq. So I was deployed to Iraq. I was in Kuwait for a couple months and went forward deployed to Iraq. So yeah, man. And then when I got back, I did get a civilian job with the Army CID working the Gitmo investigation. So I was a special agent with them for a bit and did some work with DOD. One my career wise, Border Patrol. Then I became what they call a Customs ICE special agent back in the day, working narcotics. Worked DOD bit for I said that for a while. Went back to work for ICE, and now I work for another agency out here in DC. So yeah, man, 20 something years in law enforcement, and anybody ever had us any questions like that, just shoot me a DM.
Yeah, that, like I said before, a vast experience, right? Like, so you mentioned you were with artillery in the Army. What led you to become a Border Patrol agent? Like, was that just like
Actually,
a
yeah, one of my best friends became a border patrol agent when he got
okay?
out of the army, and he was an interrogator. No, he was a linguist. He wasn't the interrogator type. But he got out and he went into the U.S. Border Patrol. And then after I got into college, I followed him into the Border Patrol. That's how I didn't know anything about the Border Patrol growing up. I grew up in New Jersey, man. That's like the farthest, it's pretty far away from the Southwest border. And it's one of those things where you end up in the Border Patrol and you're like, wow, Southwest border, pretty interesting. But I did want to get a foothold into the federal government. And that's kind of where I've been for the past 20 something years.
Okay, so you, as a border patrol agent, you were down in the Southwest area. That's
Yeah,
where
I was in
you
San
located.
Diego.
Okay.
Right next to Tijuana and the Otay Mesa mountain ranges, at a station called Brownfield. And then when I went to work drugs, I was literally 2 miles away from my border patrol station at a DEA group that I was assigned to. It was like a DEA task force type thing. So I did that for a while until I got recalled. So
Okay.
yeah, then I did when I was in Iraq. I was attached to CJ SOTF, Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force, as their anti-terrorism officer. It sounds really cool on paper, but it wasn't really that exciting. And it's one of those things where I felt like I could have done more in the war, but that's one of the reasons I have volunteered for the past year is like trying to help veterans get into federal law enforcement. That's kind of one of the things I'm really passionate about. And I love helping mentoring vets and everything else out there.
Awesome, man. So, your time in the Army, you're still serving as a federal agent. What are some of the things, some of the qualities, or some of the biggest takeaway that you've would you say you had while serving?
Just be true to your character. Don't just try to move up. It's not about the rank. It's not
Mm,
about the position. It's about doing the right thing. It's about the greater good. Because at the end of the day, when you're 50 or 55 or 60 or whatever, when you retire out of the military or out of the federal government, You got to look in a mirror. And is that mirror going to be clear or is it going to be dusty? Uh, is it going to be foggy from all the BS? So just make sure at the end of your career, at the end of your time, or however long you're in the government, whether that's military or law enforcement or whatever else you do, that you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sound advice. I think some people just kind of get lost in the ways and kind of like, in other companies, like they just want to climb the ladder and forget what the service is all about, right?
I have a philosophy. I used to use this all the time. I haven't talked about it in a while, but it's the pat on the back.
Mm.
You could be like a young E4E5, E4P. You could be a young lieutenant. You could be in the federal government, be a GS, whatever. And someone pats you on the back and says, you know what? If you don't mess up or blank up, you're going to move up. And then from that point on, they become hesitant. They become very adverse to anything that's going to cause their career from not reaching the pinnacle of what it is. You may not see them being the most proactive person when it comes to working cases or when it comes to leading soldiers and service members. So you end up with my favorite word now is feckless leadership. And
Mm.
that's one thing. That's why I always say be true to your character and don't think you can't buck the system when it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, don't get too comfortable or um, word that you hear, especially, while serving overseas is complacent. Don't get too
Yep,
complacent.
absolutely.
Awesome, man. Um, so, we talked a little bit about your service in the Army and then as a federal agent. What what led you to starting your own podcast, The Protectors, right? What how did that come about?
Well, there was a time in my career where I did a lot of things that were kind of politically hot. If you Google my name, you'll see about it. We won't really talk about it on this podcast just because I've talked about it a million times. But it's one of those things. If you Google my name, probably one of the first things you see pop up. So I used to do a lot of mainstream media. I used to talk a lot of stuff about the border, a lot of stuff about Homeland Security. And I was like, you know what? I want something that's going to spotlight not me, but other people who are quote unquote the protectors, those that run towards danger, and kind of keep it away from the political skew of it and tell their stories. I started the podcast, 270 episodes plus ago.
Wow.
Um, and what I've done is I like to interview anybody. They don't have to be like you would be a great guest. It doesn't matter. As long as you have a story. I want to tell your stories. So I've been talking to everybody and I can that's in that protector community, law enforcement, military, veterans, emergency responders, and those that support them. So I mean,
Mm.
I've had a million different New York Times best-selling authors on just because a lot of them are veterans. A lot of them have backgrounds in that stuff. I want to learn how they got to where they're at. I've had actors on. I've had everyday heroes on. I've had Medal of Honor winners on or recipients. So I mean, I like to have a very diverse audience, but I really like to kind of plug into their stories. I don't want to just get their quick 30,000-foot overview of their background. I want to kind of know who they are and I want to know why they do what they do. Because it's kind of like one of those things. Podcasting to me is like it's an opportunity to learn something different about someone and not just be like a 2 to 3 minute soundbite.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at your the website here. You got like Special Forces Green Beret, best-selling authors, former Delta Force guys. It's a variety of people, like you said, protectors who defend our country abroad and here within our communities. Um, you know, you said you've done 270 episodes so far.
I think so because I think podcast episodes themselves is probably
Right.
around 250, but then like during the pandemic, my daughter and I started a show called Piccolo's Report, and I don't even know how many episodes we did. It was a live broadcast during the pandemic, and we did that on YouTube, and it was like live every night, man. And I think that went for 30 or 40 episodes too. I don't even know. She was in there for a good 7 or 8 episodes because she was like what 9 or 10 at the time. But yeah, man, it was fun. But overall, I think maybe 270 episodes plus.
That's interesting. That's I got two daughters. My oldest is only 3, and that's one of the things I want to do is, kind of just have conversations with her and kind of just. I mean, I don't know what you all talk. What did you all talk
No,
about
that's
with
what
your
that's what we did.
podcast?
It's like, so I would be like, so this is when it was lockdown.
Okay.
So like every night I would have like a different guest on, and I would have her come up with a list of questions, and she would always ask like certain questions, and she would keep that, and she would just kind of like hang out with me while I'm doing it, and she would eventually jump on and ask some questions. But it was funny, man. It's great, and it gets him confident. Um,
Yeah.
I don't have anything to do with my children anymore on camera, or since I've kind of moved up a little bit more with a public profile. I don't really have a lot with the kids on camera or social media anymore, but it's one of those things. Is like it was just so fun to have that opportunity to share some time with her.
So you've been in the podcast game for a bit, right? You've had that experience. What are some of the interesting stories that you've heard just talking to some of the protectors?
Geez, I love the Delta Force ones. They're so humble,
Mm,
just really good guys, and a lot of just I like talking to people who have started nonprofits for the right reason. But stories overall, man, are so many good ones. And everybody check out the Protectors with Jason Piccolo. Now, it's kind of throwing a cheap plug there, but no, man, there's been so many good stories. I love talking to people. My first 10 episodes, and this is kind of advice for anybody that ever gets into it, is kind of, you know, you do a really good job. You send out, the messaging before, very in depth. When I jumped into it, I really kind of half-assed it.
mm.
I didn't know really what I was getting myself into. So I almost treated it like an interview and interrogation. So I'd be like, okay, Raiden, where were you born? What did you do after you were born? And it was very like that. And, trying to get any time out of it and trying to have a conversation with someone. I like the conversational tone of the podcasting. It's almost like therapy.
Mm. Yeah, I think in the beginning, I appreciate you for saying that, but obviously, I felt the same thing in the beginning. Like, who am I to talk to these people, and like, what gives me the right to kind of just share their story or hear their story, right? And then I was so nervous in the beginning, kind of just trying to get my foot, trying to get the show started. But like you said, as the time goes, more episodes you put in, it feels like it is sort of like therapy, because especially when you talk to somebody that's been in your situation, or has been in those has had those experiences that you've had. It creates some a bond between, as a host and a guest. It is sometimes, it feels like therapy.
It's definitely therapy, man.
Yeah.
Especially like I love, I think I'm really going to enjoy jumping on and listening to all your episodes. And that's the other thing about podcasts is if you start a podcast, support other podcasters. It's really a grind until you get to a certain point, and then it kind of gets into a um, monotonous, and then you get your re-energy. And right now I'm re-energized, and I'm fixing to jump into season 4, new logos, new everything. But one thing I do want to do is I want to ask you a question. Tell me about these coins for the fallen.
Yeah. So actually just started making these late last year, is when I had a buddy of mine who makes these coins. I wanted to create some these memorial coins for families of the fallen. Um, it was kind of it's and everything that you buy in our store, fortis-fidelis.com, everything you buy there, all the proceeds kind of help us in creating more of these. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to find a way to kind of just give back to the community, and especially to the families of those who've have sons and daughters who paid the ultimate sacrifice. um and it was just kind of my way of saying thank you, even though that's not enough, right? Because they've lost loved ones. But yeah, it was just a way of honoring and remembering, um and
I,
being grateful.
I really think that's an excellent idea because, having a token that you could just carry with you as a remembrance, I think that's incredible, brother. And I
I
do commend you
appreciate
for
it.
that as well.
Um, Jason, moving on. I was looking at your website as well. So you're also an author. You have several books. One of which I believe is Unwavering, a border agent's journey. Can you just tell us a little bit about some of the books that you've
Sure.
written? And
I wanted people to get a perspective what the Southwest border is like, what Homeland Security is like. So I wrote a memoir, Unwavering, a Border Agent's Journey, and that kind of shows my career on the border, then running an office in Delaware, and then going to DC. So kind of like, kind of showing what it's like to move up, and then kind of showing what it's like, what happens when you move up and some of the obstacles you may run into. The other book I wrote was Out of the Shadows, and that is about the young kids coming across the Southwest border, the unaccompanied minors and migrants coming across the border. These little kids.
mm,
I wanted people to understand what's going on with them and how we could protect them outside of politics. I wrote those two books, and my next book I'm working on. I've been working on it for a while. Is It's about domestic trafficking, human trafficking. That's one thing I'm very passionate about. I want to spread awareness about what's going on in our communities, in our cities, in our suburbs, in our urban environments, about women and children that are being trafficked for sex. So that's my one of my big passions. And I work with an organization, I'm wearing their hat right now, Deliver Fund, which is ex Special Forces, ex CIA, ex Intel, who actually help law enforcement. They're not the vigilante types. You do have a lot of organizations out there who are vigilantes, and I don't, you know what, in a law enforcement background, there's no room for that because the goal is to protect the victim, turn them into survivors, while also making sure the traffickers are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And if you have a vigilante, it doesn't work out. So Deliver Fund does provide intelligence specialty to law enforcement, and especially law enforcement that can't really quite afford to go out and hire full-time intelligence. So they're out there actually working and doing. So I really enjoy that. I'm really trying to get this book out. It's going to be a lot to try to document everything that goes on within the trafficking community because I really want people to understand. I've written a ton of op-eds about it. I've done a bunch of YouTube shorts on it. So if anybody wants to know anything more about that, about domestic trafficking, just shoot me a DM or shoot me an email and I'll gladly point you in the right direction.
now you said it hasn't come out. Or has it come out already? Or
No, it hasn't come out.
okay,
It's still in development because I'm trying to make sure I write the right story because it's not
okay,
about me and self gratification. It's about, showing the plight of the victims, showing how they become survivors. And I also want to show the law enforcement side of it, the street level law enforcement, the detectives, the prosecutors, people that are doing.
doing the actual work.
Yeah.
Um, you know, one of the current issues that we have right now in the country is the obviously the border, right? Can you just tell us your opinion on the current situation and what's going on down there?
The border is such an unrecognizable location unless you live on it. Nobody has any idea what's going on down there. And I keep a lot of contacts within the community and I'm always pinging them saying, what's this? What's that? I saw this news. I saw this. The thing is, the Southwest border, for people who don't understand, who live here on the East Coast, is like driving from Maine to Miami. It's literally that long on Route 95. So you
Mm.
got to cover the whole Southwest border. There is a million plus coming across a month now. These are numbers we've never seen before. I didn't even think in the 1990s when it was a heyday of trafficking, and that's when a lot of border patrol got hired and a lot of border resources. But we're just getting overrun now. Absolutely overrun. The border is nuts, and there's just simply not enough resources. There's 16,000 border patrol agents plus on the Southwest border, working 365 days a week. I mean, a year, 24/7. You got to cover all those shifts. There's not enough to cover 1,990 something miles.
You said 16,000 Border Patrol agents in the Southwest trying to stop a million plus coming in
Yeah, and the thing
from.
is, they don't have to stop them. That's a million they have in custody. That's a
Mm,
million that came across in a month. So it's like they have to deal with processing them. And it's not like you just go and say, "Hey, where are you from?" Boom, move on. Hey, where are you from? Blah blah blah. You got to do all the paperwork. You got to take their fingerprints. Got to do a quick health check, and then process them and move on. So it's not just as simple as saying, "Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the United States." There's and then our immigration system itself with the judges. So you probably have, I'd guesstimate right now about 900 something thousand backlog cases that are in immigration court. Well, Homeland Security is the enforcement branch. Department of Justice runs the immigration judges. 460 of them, give or take, judges. They handle all the hundreds of thousands plus coming across the southwest border, plus those backlog cases.
Mm.
So to say that the whole system is broken and overrun, and my only solution really is you need to piecemeal the law. The Immigration and Nationality Act, immigration law, is so cumbersome and so unwielding that you need to piecemeal it and fix it a little bit at a time. Hey, you want to have an issue with a different section of the law? Fix it. Don't just keep spreading. And with the way the political climate is now, nothing is getting done. There's no way you can have immigration reform right now. There's two distinct sides, left and right, and there's no in between anymore. There's no middle ground.
You're talking about just trying to change the immigration law completely, or just even maybe
Piecemeal.
even yeah,
Yeah.
just try some pieces of it. But like you said, political scene right now is just
Yeah.
you can't be in the middle. Like you have it's like there's
Yeah,
a
there's left or right. I
left
mean,
and right.
I could be Republican, but all of a sudden I'm far right if I
Right,
say anything. I'm like,
right.
okay, I want strict this, oop, far right. I want lenient this, oops, he's left. It's like, I kind of try to stay in the middle, especially when it comes to the podcast, but sometimes, I have to speak up,
Right.
and I don't mind speaking up. I like speaking my mind.
I want to go back to your experience as a border patrol agent. What would you say has been some of the worst days or experiences you've had um, doing that job?
It's not the border patrol where it was the worst times. It was I used to work for ICE, and I used to do a lot of fugitive type stuff. And some of the worst times is seeing the kids. The kids, that bothers me so much, not just in DC, but when I was in the field and you're going after a criminal fugitive and you encounter their kids and having to arrest the parent in front of the kids, or having to see this, what they live in, and how the parents really, some of them just don't really give a shit about that kid's
Wow.
livelihood or life. And I hate seeing that. I've always hate seeing that.
So on the flip side of that, though, what's been the most rewarding experience you've had?
You taking a stand, brother. I mean, um, I talk about it all the time. I talked about it a million times, and I won't bore your audience with it, but blowing a whistle, it's been the worst thing for my career, but mentally, it's probably the best thing I ever did because I could look myself in the mirror and know I did the right thing.
Yeah, just basically sharing the story and the truth of
Hmm.
what's really going on. And you said it's been kind of like wor- bad for your career,
Oh
just
yeah,
like
my career is over with, brother. I mean, I'll never get promoted. Um, I'll never move up. I could take every leadership course in a book. I could have any education you can imagine, but I will never move up in the federal government. But I'm fine with that. I mean,
yeah,
I know when the time comes, anything happens in the current agency I'm with now. I mean, I'm not going to turn a blind eye.
yeah, you're at peace with it because in your heart you feel like that's the right thing to do.
I tell you what, I'm not used to being on the other side of the podcast, Mike. I'm ready to jump on some questions here. I got questions for you, man.
um, well, before we go into our second segment here, Jason, what's talking about our audience are mainly veterans or active duty still are transitioning out and maybe looking into getting into that community, being a federal agent, right? What are some actionable? Well, what's one actionable step that you want to give them right now?
If you have anything that you think can be a disability, whether it's tinnitus, whether it's anything that's happened to you when you're in service, get go to the VA and get it documented and see if you qualify. Because there are different hiring authorities for the federal government. You have 5 points, 10 points. Um, there's different hiring authorities, so definitely do that. And don't feel like so many veterans I talk to feel like they don't deserve it. It's just a cost of doing business. It's not. If something that happened to you while you're on in service, make sure you get it checked out. That's one thing. The other thing is remember, a lot of federal law enforcement nowadays is networking. Make sure you get out there, talk to different people, find out about different jobs. There are so many different special agent jobs out there. That's not just the high, like the FBI, DEA, ATF. There are so many other agencies that have criminal investigator jobs. There's plenty of uniform jobs. Do what I did. I joined the Border Patrol. There's customs and border protection officers. There's a lot of different agencies that get into that aren't just special agent right off the bat with one of the big ones. Definitely do that. Work on your resume. I always treat a
Mm.
resume like an infantry fighting position. You're always developing it. Always develop your resume. When you're applying for a job, apply to that job. Don't just blanket resumes out. Because a hiring manager, which I do a lot of that, has to look at every resume and pick the right candidates for an interview. So make sure that you stand out. Make yourself stand out. If you're putting in for a job with agency XYZ, find out what their mission is, become knowledgeable, do your research, do your human SIGINT and all the other intel stuff out there. Make sure you find out what they're about. Check out organizations. I've been volunteering with an organization called Hire Heroes USA
Yeah.
and American Corporate Partners for years now. ACP for about a year plus, but Hire Heroes since I don't even know when I first started, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Check those agencies out or the nonprofits out because they'll help you. I mean, say, hey, I'm interested in federal law enforcement. Most likely they might ping me. So you'll see.
Yeah, I think I've hired heroes. I see that a lot on, especially on LinkedIn, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's another great platform to
Oh,
be in
LinkedIn.
is
That's how I got my
LinkedIn.
current job is use
Yeah,
LinkedIn, use it to your advantage.
definitely, definitely. So one final question before we go to our second segment here, Jason. What's one thing you want our listeners, our viewers, to take away from this episode?
Develop yourself and take a stand. Whatever that stand is, it doesn't have to be a macro level stand where you're going to take on the world. But if there's something you truly believe in, then take a stand.
That's it. Take a stand. There's a Abraham Lincoln quote. Um, I forget it now. It's like be where it's about being like where your feet is, and standing firm. God, I forgot the quote already. But it's basically what you're saying, right? Just like no matter right or wrong, or don't worry about the consequences,
Consequences, yeah.
as long as in your heart that you feel like this is the right thing to do. Don't be afraid to speak
Make
up.
decisions.
Yeah.
That's leadership fundamental 101 is make a decision. It may not be the right one, but use what the facts you have and you make the decision because hesitancy kills.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's important. Make a decision, and take a stand. Awesome, man. Um, so Jason, going into our second segment here, this is what I call the fast five. It's the same
That's
five
fine. Let's do
questions
it. Hell
as all
yeah.
my guests.
You know what? One thing I do
Yeah.
is I live my life a quarter mile at a time. Come on, fast five, brother.
Yeah, that was all-time favorite when I was growing up. First question: what's one hobby you enjoy?
Writing. I love writing. You know what? If absolutely love writing.
So I want to write a book one of these days. What's one advice that you can kind of give as far as writing and telling a story and things like that?
Two pieces of advice. One is write, edit later. The other one is do a mind map. And if you don't know what a mind map is, it's kind of like what you do is you say, okay, I want to write about this. And you put that in the middle of get a big piece of poster board. put your subject right in the middle. And then you go off of that subject, almost like a spider web, and you write little circles and you say, okay, this is what part of the subject I want to write about. This is that, and keep spiraling it off. So it's going to look like a big map. And then when you're writing, when you're write, edit later, you don't have to write A to B to C to D. You don't have to be chronological. You could just go and say, hey, tonight I'm going to write about that, or today I'm going to write about that. One of those little blocks in your mind map. So think about that. And if you want to write a book, write it. There are so many opportunities to self-publish now and hire someone to do a quick edit. You might as well just write the book. They say anybody that wants to really get, I've talked to a million authors. And they say anybody who really wants to become a writer, don't do it for money, one. Don't do it for power and prestige, two. And the other thing is you have to write a million words. Now, me, I didn't write a million words, but I'm getting there. I'm working on it. I write op-eds. I write whenever I can. It's like therapy.
Awesome, man. I'll take that up. You said mind map.
Yeah, you could always ping me, and anybody else has any questions, ping me. I did a YouTube video with a bunch of vets about it a long time ago. Okay. But we go into that. But I'll absolutely help anybody that ever wants to talk about that stuff.
Awesome, brother. Next question here. If you had to choose one person to hang out with for one day, who would it be and why?
George Washington, brother. Come on. The man. I want to know what it was like to spark a revolution. What that actual felt like. And what went into it. Not saying I'm going to become a revolutionary, but there's other means where, winning over so many people that has so much to lose. I'd love to know how that happens. There's no social media. There's no really a ton of written record that, about him that's like day to day, so I'd like to know what that was like.
Yeah. And having that, like the characteristics, right, of like the nation behind you, gathering behind you, and like you said, starting a revolution. Okay, so speaking of books, what's recommended book for our audience to read?
Oof. My favorite book probably of all time is About Face by Colonel David Hackworth.
I've heard that's about that before, but I haven't read it yet.
Oh, you got to read it. It's amazing. It's about him in Vietnam and post Vietnam, and it's an incredible read, especially in today's day.
Okay, About Face. You should check that out. Next question: what's your favorite quote and why?
Geez, I think it's absolute power corrupts, or power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I believe that's how it goes. But that's it. I see it all the time.
Last question here. What do you see yourself in a year, 5 years, or even 10 years from now?
A year? Well, I'm going to go with 16 months. Hopefully I'll be out of the federal government. And 5 years, I'd like to be hosting my own show. Like, besides, I'd like to be on air somewhere, hosting like an interview-based type show. And I'd like to really, I'd like to have about 2 or 3 more nonfiction books, but I want to jump into the fiction realm as well.
Okay. When you say show, like be on television,
yeah,
like your show.
I do TV now, but I want to kind of host my own gig.
That's why you mentioned Core TV, right?
Yeah, I've been doing Core TV weekly, like law enforcement analysis stuff.
Okay.
Almost every week since September 2020. I'll be on tonight and I'll be on tomorrow night too. It's coretv.com, Core TV Online, Core TV Cable. Got to get my radio voice in there too, so when I go online.
Awesome, man. Hey, Jason, I appreciate you for taking the time. One final thing before we go, man. Where can our audience, where can they follow you? Where can they support you at?
Instagram, I'm most active on there at Dr. Jason Piccolo. And my YouTube channel is at The Protectors Show. So check that out. The podcast is The Protectors with Dr. Jason Piccolo. So yeah, man, definitely like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I just like to have a good conversation. So listen in.
Awesome. Make sure you all check that out. The Protectors podcast with Dr. Jason Piccolo. Man, we didn't even go into that. Like, you have your Dr. Jason Piccolo. What was your degree in?
Well, I had my master's in forensic science and my doctor's in strategic security.
Awesome, man. I mean, a wealth of knowledge here. guys and gals. Make sure you reach out to Jason Piccolo. Again, check out the podcast, The Protectors. Go check out his books, right? Unwavering and Out of the Shadows is not yet published, right? We're
No,
still
Out of
waiting
the
for that.
Shadows is published. Both books are, if you go to Amazon, they're both priced at
Okay.
cost. I don't make any profits off of it. I'd rather people just understand what's going on. So at cost. And if you really are desperate, I'll send you. I shouldn't say desperate, but if you don't have the money to buy them, just pay me and I'll make sure I get you. What do you call it? The Kindle version of it.
Awesome. Jason, I appreciate you for taking the time, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon, brother.
You will. Thanks a lot, man.
Awesome. Take care.